So, good afternoon, everyone. So, let's continue our discussion on basic pro forma computation for uh, uh, for individual taxpayers, self-employed, and professional. Okay, so we are through with, let's review lang for the meantime, the basic pro forma. If we have selected the option of itemized deduction, we will discuss that later. As I've mentioned on our previous discussion, we will discuss that in detail on chapter 5. Then we have your optional standard deduction. So if you have noticed, ang kinalainan nila is only the deduction. Okay? Because in itemized, it is detailed. And for optional standard deduction, that is automatic 40% of your gross sale or receipt if you are a service provider. Okay, so let's proceed. So it is important to mention that we have to identify the VAT threshold of 3 million. Okay, so since if the gross receipts will exceed 3 million, so it will be no longer subject to percentage tax, and it will the option of 8% income tax rate will no longer be available on that particular taxpayer. Okay, so let's proceed now to the detailed pro forma computation for uh, for taxpayer engaged in business or self-employed and professional. So if you have noticed in our presentation, we have two columns colored under green and blue and orange. Okay? So that signifies the qualification or ang threshold as to gross receipts and sales sang aton nga mga taxpayer. So why is it that ang basis is gross sales, gross receipt, not taxable income? Because amuning pinakauna kagapos i-identify in actual practice, because there's no need for a further computation. All you have to do is to verify all the gross sales and receipts, and that's the time you can identify on which bracket or in which what are the options available based on your gross income or gross receipts. Okay, on the first column, we have gross sales, gross receipt is less than 3 million or less than the VAT threshold, which is subject to 1% percentage tax. Okay? So it means that the taxpayer which has an gross income or gross receipts lower or below 3 million is selected or opted or choose the 1% percentage tax option. So in short, subject to 1%, and he opted or selected the 8% income tax rate rather. Okay? So, again, there are two options available for ano na gani? For taxpayer under this bracket. Okay? Under this bracket. Okay, first option, if he selected the 8% gross 8% income tax rate, okay? That is the first option. And the second option, if the taxpayer feels that it would be beneficial sa iyang sa iyang tax due, he can select the second option in which he can or she can select either graduated income tax rate, okay, using the tax table. Graduated siya, okay. Then of course, since it is graduated, we have two options in deducting in arriving in our taxable income by using the itemized deduction and your OSD, which is already discussed on the previous slides or in last discussion, last meeting. Okay, so this is just a brief comparison between the three options. On the second column, if the taxpayer's gross sales receipts exceed 3 million and it does not exceed 3 million or does not exceed the VAT threshold, so but the taxpayer is subject to the percentage tax under Title 5 of the tax code. So guys, if the taxpayer is subject to percentage tax other than 1%, you have to check if your taxpayer belongs to those enumerated under Title 5 of the tax code. So that would be discussed na sa next semester sa inyo. But for discussion, for the purpose of discussion of income tax, please bear in mind that taxpayers enumerated under Title 5 of the tax code is no longer avail or cannot avail the 8% income tax rate option. So kung na-notice nyo guys, the computation on the blue column, which is on the blue column is the same with the second column. Okay? The same with the second column. Ang only difference lang nila is the business tax. This is just for illustration purpose. We will know business taxes is not covered under the subject. Okay, that would be discussed in tax 2, but for illustration lang kag para ma-appreciate nyo ang relationship between income tax and business tax, I have provided a brief view or comparison between these taxpayers under different level of gross income. So for taxpayers earning or has a gross receipts or gross income less than 3 million, which is subject to 1% percentage tax, the tax nga iya nga bayaran will be 8% of the taxable income if he selected the 8% option. And on the other hand, kung ang gimpili iyang option is graduated, so he will pay according to the rates, according to the bracket in which his taxable income na fall, na kundi di na natupa. Okay? Aside from that, aside from this one or this one, the taxpayer will also pay business tax, which is 1% of gross sales or receipts. That is what we call the 1% percentage tax. Okay? So, on the other hand, if the taxpayer does not qualify for the 1% tax and he belongs or his income belongs to those enumerated under Title 5 of the tax code, so he will pay the business tax, the respective business tax on which kung ano to ang mga percentages ang gin-prescribe sang layi. Okay? Aside from the income tax graduated. Then, if the taxpayer exceed the gross sales or receipt of the taxpayer exceed that VAT threshold or greater than 3 million, so ang kinalain lang sang computation, wala sa actually kinalain sang computation on this one, and this one. Okay? Except lang, he will pay the VAT, the business tax, ang nga bayaran sang sole proprietor will be 12% value added. Okay? So, that is just a brief comparison. Kung tanaw mo guys, the pro forma computation is still the same. That's why ginpakita ko in one presentation para makita yung difference. So, diri lang nagalain ang computation natin. Okay? So, please take note. Then, if ever there are questions or data provided in your quizzes, so please take note lang, this is the additional or the business tax ang bayaran sang aton nga mga different taxpayers belonging to levels, kundi siya nga level na tupa in terms of gross sales or gross receipts. Okay, so let's proceed. Let's provide some illustration. Okay, so the same ni siya kagina sa nga slide pag minimize ko lang for reference. Okay, so the question is, Atlas is a practicing CPA or a practicing certified public accountant with gross receipts and non-operating income of 2,500,000 and cost and expenses of 1,700,000. So the term used is cost and expenses since wala pa nato na reach ang chapter 5. But if we reach chapter 5, that will considered as itemized deduction or expenses allowed by the law or simply in itemized deduction. So the cost or expenses or simply business expenses is in the amount of 1,700,000. So the question is, How much was the income tax for the year of Atlas? Okay, so this is the options available for Atlas. Since Atlas did not reach the VAT threshold, so 2.5 lang ang iyang 2,500,000 lang iyang gross ano na gani? Gross sales. So he can avail the option of 8% income tax. Then and or he can select the graduated income tax rate. So for graduated income tax rate, uh, Atlas can also select between itemized deduction and the optional standard deduction. So ang ano lang na di guys, ang question lang na di or ang kumbaga ang bearing in decision making is the amount of expenses or the amount of deduction. Amo lang magkinalain da. So let's discuss. So based on the discussed pro forma computation, so we have your gross sales, gross receipt on the first row, then add your non-operating income and expenses. So in our problem, wala na siya ging identify. So we can proceed now directly to total or total gross income, 2,500,000 in both options. Okay? Less fixed deduction of 250,000. So guys, your 250,000, if you remember the tax table, so sa atong graduated income tax table, the first bracket is not over 250. So if you notice, the tax for that income which is not exceeding 250,000 is zero, di ba? So the ang income pa yang subject to tax is income in excess of 250,000. So guys, your option 1, when you opt to select 8% income tax rate, so you are allowed to deduct from your gross income or gross receipts the amount of 250 because this amount is non-taxable pa nga portion. Okay? So in short, the taxable income or the tax base for income tax for 8% income tax is 2,250,000. That is the difference between your income and the fixed deduction of 250. So multiply 2,250,000 with 8% income tax rate. That gives us pila ni? 200 sorry. 180. 180 lang guys. So 180. So let me correct first my PowerPoint. Okay. Okay, so going back. So the income tax for 8% option is 180,000 only. That is computed by multiplying 2,250,000 multiplied by 8% income tax rate. That gives us 180,000. Okay, for the second option, so if the taxpayer or Mr. Atlas opted to select graduated, since gina-anticipate yan na medyo madako-dako guro ang iyang income, then he already foreseen that there are ang expenses is dako. So dako and it will compensate his income. So Mr. Atlas opted to select or trying to compute for his second option or option 2 using itemized deduction or using his actual expenses as deduction to gross income in order to arrive at the taxable income which is subject to graduated income tax. So Mr. Atlas gross income is 2,500,000. That is less with the actual expenses assuming this is all assuming this is all allowed by the tax code, since way pa natakalabot, chapter 5, so we have to assume this is allowed by the law, ng 1.7, so the difference of 800,000 will be based on the tax computation provided by the graduated tax table. So the same with our discussion last meeting. So using those formula or those computation, we can arrive at an income tax of 130,000. Okay? Next, second option for Mr. Atlas is to use graduated income tax table, but for deduction, he opted to select the 40% OSD. So that is 2,500,000 multiplied by 40% nga OSD. So the OSD is 1 million. 1 million or 2,500,000 minus 1 million, that gives us 1,500,000. So using the graduated income tax table, that would fall on bracket din siya ma-fall man. Okay. So 1.5 million, it will fall on the fourth bracket. So 130,000 ang tax for the first 800, and the excess of 1.5 million minus 800,000 multiplied by 30%, so that is 280 plus 130,000. So the total tax of Mr. Atlas, if Mr. Atlas chooses to use graduated income tax table, and for his deduction, he selected tax, ano na gani? Optional standard deduction. So he will have income tax due of 340,000. So guys, if you are on the decision has the opportunity to decide what option to use if your income qualify for an option of 8%. So you have to, based on this example, Mr. Atlas, of course, will choose the 8% income tax option. Since Mr. Atlas will choose second option, or the itemized deduction, or using the second option, which is graduated income tax na option, and instead of using OSD, dapat gamito ni Mr. Atlas is the itemized deduction. But the problem, guys, in actual practice, for itemized deduction, you have to declare it separately. Inamin ko, i-declare mo gid isa-isa, and you have to prove if ever there are ng tax audits nga i-conduct ang Bureau of Internal Revenue, so the burden of proof will go to the taxpayer. But for filing and computation, simpre self-declared pa lang na anay. So, in case, ang problema na if you're going to select the itemized deduction, syempre, do medyo may red flag na si BIR kung tama kada ko ang imo expenses. Kasi syempre, eventually, it will, the effect is reduction in your income tax due. Okay? So, aring mga OSD guys, OSD and 8% income tax rate, if the taxpayer is qualified to select, mas namin siya for filing, because no more burden of proof in terms of deduction, because it is provided by law, the 250,000 yung deduction as fixed deduction, and OSD 40%, it is also provided by law. So wala na isang burden of proof. All you have to do is to verify your gross sales. Kontsakto gid. Amo lang nakasimple. But if you're going to select the optional standard deduction, so of course you have to prove, or in case that you will be subjected by tax audit by the Bureau of Internal Revenue, the taxpayer has burden of proof nga ang declare nga expenses is justifiable and evidenced by sufficient business document kag allowed gid sang layi. So that's the that's the consequence lang in choosing itemized deduction. Okay, so let's proceed. The option of 8% income tax rate is not available to the following taxpayer. So this is the tax basis The tax authority for this is RR 8020/2018. So guys, that is under trained law man Japan, and that is just the implementing rules sa Bureau of Internal Revenue. So I've seen or checked in the internet and in the website of Bureau of Internal Revenue, this was not yet superseded. Okay? So those are VAT registered taxpayers or taxpayers with gross receipts exceeding 3 million. So they are not allowed to select 8% income tax rate because it will be unfavorable para sa government. Second, taxpayers, as mentioned earlier, subject to other percentage tax under Title 5 of the Tax Code except under Section 116. You can browse that on the internet. You can check that who are taxpayers under this provision of our tax code, and it will be I will no longer discuss this one in detail since it will be covered by your tax next semester. Okay. Third, partners of a general professional partnership, GPPP, by virtue of their distributed share, which is already net of cost and expenses. So guys, remember, depending on how the GPP distributes its share or how ano ang agreement sa mga partners under GPP. If ang distribution nila is based on gross receipts, I think the practicing professional can select 8% income tax rate because ang question lang na diya is double claiming of expenses. If the share of professional or practicing partners in the GPP is already net of expenses, then magamit pagid siya sang 8% income tax rate. And take note that is deducted when you are using 8% income tax rate. You will be eligible for claiming 250,000 fixed deduction. Remember, bago lang natin i-discuss. So that is already double deduction na. So that is very disadvantageous to the government. That's why the law does not allow GPP or partners under GPP to claim or to use the option of 8% income tax. Take note, may na siya, may itemized na siya on the GPP itself. Then, pag-compute sa GPP sang ilang net income, so natural na buwinan na ang ilang net nga mga mga expenses, di ba? Then, i-divide nila. Pag labot kay partner A, gamito niyang 8%, dasol masulod na diyo sa gross income ya, minus pag 250. So, double deduction. So, logically speaking, we can see why the law prohibits distributive share of partners under GPP to claim the 8% income tax rate option. Okay? Sige. Next. Illustration 2. More illustration. After this, I think I will provide additional assignments or homeworks para ma-practice nato ng aton nga or ma-apply nato natunan in this video. Okay, so the same guys nga perform a computation, ging copy ko lang siya kaging pagamay. Okay, Belleric, a sole proprietor subject to 2% tax with gross receipts and non-operating income of 2,500,000 and cost and expenses of 1,700,000. How much was the income tax of Mr. Belleric for the taxable year? So first, we have to identify which option, ano ang mga option ni Mr. Belleric. So, of course, Mr. Belleric can no longer use this computation ang naka-green nga rows because this option is only available to taxpayers with gross receipts and gross sales which is less than sa VAT threshold. So, yes, nakaka-comply da si Mr. Belleric. So, but misugpon pa, dapat subject to 1% tax. So, Mr. Belleric, as provided in the problem, Mr. Belleric is subject to 2% percentage tax. Maybe that is franchise tax under the tax code. So, maybe franchise tax na siya. But, again, that is subject for your tax to next semester. I will not discuss that one. It's enough that you have an idea what are the relationship between income tax and business taxes. para in relation in support lang sa atong discussion sa income tax. Okay? So you will learn that on your second semester ang business tax. Okay? So for this moment, Mr. Belleric cannot use this computation because he is subject to 2% percentage tax. So in short, Mr. Belleric will be available for the third column. Gross sales receipts less than 3 million but subject to percentage tax under the Title 5 of the tax code. Okay? So if we're going to examine the formula, nothing's changed. Wala gid. Parehas lang. So gross sales receipt, add non-operating income, you can arrive at your total income, less your itemized or OSD, as the case may be. And that would arrive at your taxable income. Then from your taxable income, you have to use your income tax table graduated. Okay, so what we discussed previous last or in previous meeting. Okay, sige, let's compute. So for Mr. Belleric, Mr. Belleric has two options, whether to use itemized deduction or OSD. So before on the first quarter sang pag-prepare ni guys, dapat i-identify na or i-analyze na ni Mr. Belleric kung anong piliyon niya nga deduction scheme sa pag-deduct, either itemized or optional, because that is irrevocable for the entire year. Hindi na niya pwede maisla ng iya nga select iya nga pili nga option at the end of the year. Okay? Sa bilog nga tuig, I mean. Okay, so sige. So Mr. Belleric, wala man hindi identifiable ang iyang gross sales and receipt as well as ang iyang non-operating income kay naka-combine na, naka 2.5. So we have your total 2,500,000 for both computation, both columns, less itemized deduction. So it is given in the problem 1.7. Then, or if Mr. Belleric uses OSD, so that is 2,500,000 times 40%, that is 1 million OSD, yeah. So the taxable income subject for graduated income tax rate will be 800,000 for itemized deduction and 1,500,000 for OSD. So using the table, since 800 na sa ulo na naton, 800 subject to 130%. 800 is subject to 130,000 tax, then the excess of it will be subject to 32%. Let's verify kay hindi mo kadumdum. Kalipat mo ko. Table. Dapat may hulid na tanga table sa aton tupad always. So that would be yes 25%. 25%. So 1 point pila to? 1 point illustration to. Okay, so 1.5 million minus 800,000. So 700,000 multiply it by 25%. So that is 175 plus 175 plus the 130, that gives us 340,000. Okay, so just use your table guys. Verify the ano. I think may problema sa computation sa akong PowerPoint for a while. Let me correct. 12% naman. 30. 30. Sakto na sa guys. So that is 340,000. Okay. So for OSD, that is 340,000 under illustration 2. Okay, sige. Next. Illustration 3. How about if Miss Hilda is sole proprietor, subject to 1%? So subject sa 1%. Pwede na di siya bala kasulod. Maybe it's too late pa. Let's read the entire problem first. Too early pagali. 1% percentage tax with gross receipts and non-operating income of 6 million. So of course, Miss Hilda does not qualify anymore for this pro forma computation. Miss Hilda will qualify on the last pro forma computation since her income exceeds the VAT threshold of 3 million. Okay? And the expenses, cost and expenses of Miss Hilda, or simply business expenses, is in the amount of 3,500,000. How much was the income tax of Miss Hilda for the year? Okay, so again, Miss Hilda has the option to use itemize or OSD. So gross sales, gross and non-operating income of Miss Hilda is in the total of 6 million. Okay. So itemized, it is provided in the problem that is 3,500,000. For OSD, that is 6 million nga gross receipts and other income multiplied by 40%. That is 2,400,000. That is the allowed deduction of Miss Hilda if Miss Hilda opted to select the optional standard deduction. Okay? So the taxable income will be 2,500,000 for itemized deduction and 3,600,000 for OSD. So using the income tax table or the graduated income tax table, Miss Hilda's gross income tax using itemized deduction is 650 and using OSD is 1,200,000. So, amo nang bayar nila nga tax if Miss Hilda chooses this itemized deduction or OSD. Okay? Again, as I mentioned earlier, mas hapos lang niya i-justify sa BIR if you select OSD. No need na to enumerate all your expenses. No need na to prove that that is actually exist, that expenses or business expenses or costing expenses is allowed by law. Unlike yes itemize, magamay-gamay to yung mga expenses, but later on, if the Bureau of Internal Revenue will conduct a tax audit, you have to prove that your declaration is correct. Okay? So, let's proceed. Next, we have quarterly income tax. Actually, guys, in our discussion, that was an annual income tax computation. So, if you are using taxable year, you will start your transaction from January 1 and it will end on December 31. If you are using calendar year, most of the businesses use calendar year. But if you use select fiscal year, as long as maka 12-month period ka lang, that would be your ano. So if you're going to start your business or accounting cycle on February 1, of course, you will end in January 31 next year. Okay, wala na siya. But excuse, for for computation purposes, the law allows what we call quarterly income tax. Why? Because para mapugtak-pugtak mo guys ang imong computation and you can pay in advance your income tax. Try to imagine if you were Miss Hilda, you will pay 650,000 at the end of the year. So that would be between December 31 to April 15 if you are using calendar year. So if you are Miss Hilda, is it hindi man bugat ang 650? Of course, for me, that is already half of my salary, I think, for the entire year ang iyang bayaran nga tax. So of course, that's very large. Depende sa mga taxpayer. But maybe Miss Hilda guro dam dati. Pwede yan na mabayad, isa lang kapag check eh. So, na. But hindi man tanan si Miss Hilda. So that's why the law provides for quarterly filing of income tax and quarterly payment of course. So para ma-divide mong imong nga payment into 4, so in that case, kung i-divide ka lang equally, example lang, so mabayad lang at least 150 si Miss Hilda every quarter. Okay, but let's continue our quarterly income tax discussion. Okay, so for self-employed are required to file 3 quarterly income tax returns, that is BIR Form 1701Q, and annual income tax return, BIR Form 1701. Okay, so the date in the return for first quarter transaction for the first quarter. And the beginning the second quarter and up to the end of the taxable quarter is on a cumulative basis. So guys, naga-pile up. Hindi po silingon nga naka-file and pay ka na sa first quarter, the data or the information, let's say grow your gross income and expenses on the first quarter will no longer be considered. Kumbaga, pugtak-pugdak. That's not the case in quarterly income tax payment. Nag-pile up siya, guys. So, i-accumulate mo siya. So, if you're going to compute your second quarter, you have to include all your business transaction from January or from the beginning of your first quarter. I-include mo na siya. But, the law allows lang Okay na siya sa last sentence. The income tax paid in the previous quarter. So in my explanation earlier, ang gibayad mo to nga tax on your income from January to March will be deducted from the period in which the income tax is computed within the taxable year. So let's apply that explanation. So illustration, quarterly income tax. Okay? So this will be the information or income data or business transactions ni sa atin yung taxpayer. So our taxpayer has a gross receipt for the first quarter 500,000, then second quarter 500,000, third quarter 2 million, pagka fourth quarter 3.5 million na. Then the respective costs and expenses are 300,000 and 120 respectively for first quarter, 300 and 120 as well for second quarter, and third has a 1.2 million and 480,000 nga operating expenses. For the fourth quarter, the cost of sales is 1,200,000 and operating expenses is 720,000. So if we're going to put the date and the taxpayer uses calendar year, so first quarter will be January 1 to March 31. Second quarter will be April 1 to June 30. Then third quarter will be July 1 to September 30. And fourth quarter will be October 1 to December 31. Okay? So these are the computation. So since the taxpayer, ang selection guys, sang 8% nga option is on the first quarter mo, okay? But in case that at the end of the year or any of the quarter, nag-exceed na ang imo gayet nga threshold, nalabot mo na ang VAT threshold nga 3 million, so you will no longer be qualified or you are no longer allowed to use 8%. So what if, just like in my example, just like in the computation presented, 8% ang gingamit niya on the first quarter since obviously wala na reach ang VAT threshold, 'di ba? So the taxpayer has the option to use 8% income tax rate or graduated income tax. Okay? So, for computation, ang ginpili kung i-present guys ang komplikado nga may pinaka komplikado nga na gani nga case. That's why on the first three quarters ni gani sa ating taxpayer is subject to 8%. Okay, let's compute isa-isa. So let's review first the formula. So actually the formula is copied from our previous slides. Gross sales or receipt, add non-operating income or receipt, then total, then we have your fixed deduction if you are using 8% or if you opted to select 8%, then we have itemized deduction, we have OSD. Okay? Then for taxable income, your total less these applicable deductions, ini lang na sa tatlo sine, pili lang kung di nang applicable, then we can arrive at your taxable income. Then and after identifying your tax base, you use or you multiply it with the 8% income tax rate or use the graduated rates under our schedular table, and that would be your income tax due for the quarter. Okay? Then we have your income tax paid on previous quarter and income tax still due or payable at the end of the quarter. So, using the information, this will be the last slide and we will dismiss. Okay? So, first quarter, we have 500. So, ari siya guys. Then, the cost and expenses. So, since the taxpayer uses or elected the option of 8%, this is irrelevant. This is no longer applicable. Okay? In this computation lang, on the first quarter lang, since 8% ang gigamit niya, di ba? We are not allowed to use cost and expenses to deduct in our gross receipts if we selected the 8% income tax rate. So instead, we are allowed by law to deduct what we call fixed deduction in the amount of 250,000. So, ang mula ng allowed deduction sa aton. So, 500 minus 250, your taxable income will be 250. So, 250 multiplied by 8%, that gives us 20,000. So 20,000 ang imo nga tax due for the first quarter. And of course, this computation, of course bayaran mo na. You have to file you have to file and pay your taxes computed on the first quarter. So bayaran mo ni siya ang 20,000. Okay? So again, still due and payable ko lang na siya. But when you file, you have to pay kung anong na-compute mo da. Okay? Next, after the end of June 30, that is the end of the second quarter. So based on the previous slide, ang computation sa quarterly income tax is on a cumulative basis. So it means that on the second quarter, you have to include all your transactions on the first quarter. Okay? So that is 500 plus 500. That gives us 1 million nga gross receipts and sales. Then, add non-operating. In our example, wala. There's none. Of course, your total income will be 1 million. Again, this one, this one, this one, this one. Since the taxpayer selected the 8% option, it is no longer, it is not yet applicable. Hindi pa na siya pagamiton because ma-double deduction ta na. Since the law allows us to deduct what we call fixed deduction of 250. So that's 1 million minus 250. Your taxable income for second quarter is 750. So 750 multiply the 8 by the 8% ng income tax rate, your income tax due for second quarter is 60. Then the question is, sir, ging-include ko na niyang are, di ba? Sa dire. So ang are or the 500,000 on first quarter is already subjected to 20,000. Then include ko pagid siya. Hindi na siya double taxation. Yes, double taxation siya if the law does not allow the income tax paid on previous quarter to be deducted. So, ari na siya. Okay? So, your 220,000 nga still due and paid on first quarter will be deducted from your gross, from your income tax on the succeeding quarter. So, in our case, that is the second quarter. So, 60 ang mo bayaran, nabayaran mo na ang 20,000 last quarter. So, of course, simple math will tell you that you will only pay 40,000 for your second quarter filing and payment of your income tax return. So you have to pay only 40,000. Okay? So next, let's continue our discussion. Third quarter, naglabot na. Another 3 months operation ang natapos. So ang 3 months nga computation nga transaction nga business operation naton gives us a gross receipts of 2 million. So that is from July 1 to September 30, we have earned 2 million nga gross receipt. And of course, we have used our resources, and it was accounted that cost of sales is 1.2 million and your operating expenses is 480,000. Okay? Still, 500 since accumulated for the third quarter filing and payment. Amo ni dapat ang i-compute mo. First 500 and another 500. So that's 1 million plus 2 million, 3 million. Still, we did not reach the VAT threshold. So of course, we can still remain in our previous nga option nga ginpili, which is 8% nga income tax rate. Okay? So that gives us 3 million. Still, wala nang operating income, 3 million ang total. Then, since we are using 8% income tax rate, we are allowed by law to deduct a fixed deduction of 250,000. So kung na-notice nyo guys, wala ga-accumulate ang fixed deduction na because ang fixed deduction under the law, nga 250,000, that is annual. Okay? Hindi quarter. That is annual. That's why wala na siya gina-accumulate. Wala na siya gina-add. Okay? Wala na gina-add. Why na gina-accumulate? Because that is the only allowed nga fixed tax deduction for the entire year. Take note, these 3 columns are just quarters. Quarter lang ni. So that's why wala na gina-add. 250 lang na siya Japon. So, the taxable income on your third quarter will be 2,750,000. So using 8%, it will arrive at the income tax of 220. Again, according sa aton, ma-double taxation ta since first and second quarter was already paid. Okay? Nakabayad na to sa aton nga advance tax dira sa first and second nga quarter. So natural, we have already paid 20,000 on the first quarter and 40,000 on the second quarter. So all in all, that is 60,000. So 60,000 na ang nabayad naton from our income tax due nga 220. In short, we are going to pay 160 at the end of the third quarter. Okay? So may mga deadline man na siya. If I'm not mistaken, that is 15th day at the end of the quarter. Okay? So mabayad na si taxpayer 160,000. Okay. Ari na ang do medyo challenge nga portion. So on the fourth quarter, medyo nag-earn dako ang aton nga taxpayer. So for October 1 to December 31 alone, Mr. Taxpayer earned 3,500,000. Sa diri pa lang adaan, na-reach na ang VAT threshold. Okay? So if you reach the VAT threshold, you are no longer allowed to use the 8% income tax rate. So ano nang gamiton mo? Of course, you will use graduated income tax. Okay na? Mag-graduated ka na. Okay? Graduated income tax rate ang gamiton mo na. Then, you have to pay either percentage tax or value-added tax. But, that problem will be settled next semester na lang. Dili lang ta sa income tax ano eh. So, 3,500,000. Okay? Third quarter. So, of course, since accumulated, when we talk about quarterly income tax, so you have to include all your income and expenses from January 1 up to December 31. Okay? Amo ning pinaka-final computation na naton, guys, ang fourth quarter. This is first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. Kag kung notice mo, for the year na nisa. This is the actual tax computation na. Okay? This will be 1701Q, 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 and 1701. Okay? So, again, our taxpayer has two options in terms of deduction. Pwede siya kapili sang duha ka types ng deduction, either itemized or OSD. Depende siya kung ano dang gusto niya. Since dire pa lang siya nakapili what itemized deduction, so for sa fourth quarter siya mapili ang iya nga pag-select, pag-vote or pagpili kung ano ang gamiton kay may gina-check ka na sa taxpayer sa ano guys mo sa income tax return may gina-check ka na ang item, checkan mo ang box ng itemized deduction if you want to use itemized deduction and put check or X mark on the box provided for OSD, and that decision is irrevocable for 1 year. Hindi mo na pwede maislan. Next year ka na pwede ka ilis. So, sa atong nga example, sa fourth quarter, paman siya nag-arise ang ini nga kondisyon nga mapili sa kundiin. Okay, so, gaan ta option si taxpayer naton kung ano ang the best based sa iya nga mga information nga provide. So, plus mo ni 500 plus 500 plus 2 million plus 3,500,000, that gives us 6,500,000. Okay, then still we have no non-operating income, so that will be your total income. Then kung na-notice nyo guys, there's no longer 250. Okay, because we are no longer allowed to use 8% income tax rate because we exceed the VAT threshold, so we are no longer cannot avail the 8% option. So instead, we are going to use either itemized or OST, depende sa gusto ni taxpayer. Okay? So for itemized deduction, this information will be relevant na. So 300,000 plus first quarter, 300,000 plus 120,000 plus 300,000 plus 120,000 plus 1.2 million plus 480,000 plus 1.2 million plus 720,000. That gives us 4,440,000 for itemized deduction. For OSD, muning hapos lang 6.5 times 40%. So that is 2,600,000. Then for respective taxable income for itemized, the taxable income will be 440, 2,600,000. And for OSD, for taxpayers selecting OSD, that is 3.9. Then using our graduated income tax table, so you can verify that one. Check on nyo lang sa graduated tax table ta guys, but the computation is 509,200 for itemized, and for OSD that's 1,098,000. Okay? So amo niyang tutuod nga income tax due ni taxpayer if he uses OSD. Are itemized rather. For OSD amo ni siya. But in previous quarters, we have already paid, di ba? So we ka simple lang buhin ta eh. So 20,000 plus 40,000, that's plus 160, that is 220,000. So i-minus na lang. So nabayaran mo na namong bayaran mo paliwat, di ba? Hindi na syempre, hindi mo na kailangan na sa ulon. Common sense will tell you that you will deduct that amount. Bayaran mo na, bayaran mo pagid. So syempre, mayas mo. Okay, so you will only pay, i-minus mo, pero i-declare mo na Japan sa income tax return mo. So you will pay only 289,000. Okay? For itemized deduction. Kag kung tinamaran ka, kag gusto mo mag-OSD na lang, bala na kung dako or gamay. So, ang balayran mo is 870,000. Okay. So, let's continue our discussion for married taxpayer both with income from business or profession next meeting. Okay, guys. See you next meeting.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, good sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.